There was chaos along the border. When Ethan Brown led the emergency team to retreat, there was only one seat left on the rescue plane. Everyone thought that seat would be for me. But in the end, the person who boarded the plane with him was another woman, Lily. Maybe Ethan was afraid I would cling to him. So that night, he took Lily away without even leaving me a medical kit. The gunfire in the war zone could easily trigger her asthma. And in such a chaotic environment, she wouldn't survive until morning. The medical kit had to go with her. After settling her down, he told me he would send the nearest rescue team back for me. "Once you're home," he said, "we'll get married right away." But when the battle spread, the temporary shelter was bombed, and half of it turned into rubble. I curled up in a corner behind the collapsed wall, my body covered in wounds. I fell unconscious, still waiting for him. Years later, when we met again, Ethan's eyes locked fiercely on Lucas's hand resting around my waist. His expression darkened, and in the next second, he suddenly lunged toward me, his voice hoarse and trembling with emotion. "Emily, why?" he choked out. "Didn't you say that once we got home, we'd register our marriage? How could you cut off all contact and even marry someone else?" His words hit me like a blow to the chest. For a moment, all the noise around us faded and my mind went blank. It felt like déjà vu, like I was suddenly back at the airport on the day I returned home. At the baggage claim area in the airport, a young woman standing nearby kept glancing at me. After the 5th time, she finally couldn't help herself. "Excuse me, are you Emily Lane?" she asked. I turned slightly puzzled, and when she realized it was really me, she grabbed my hand excitedly. "It really is you, Emily. The story about you and Ethan Brown has been passed around the border medical team for years. I can't believe I finally get to meet you in person. You're even more beautiful than I imagined." It was the first time in 6 years since surviving that I'd heard Ethan Brown's name again, spoken so casually as she continued talking, recalling what had become a legend. 6 years ago, when the border conflict broke out, the airports and seaports were completely cut off. Communication with the outside world was nearly impossible. People whispered that the man who had volunteered to stay behind wasn't just any military doctor. It was Ethan Brown himself, who had chosen to remain and lead his team through the encirclement and flames, risking his life just to save his girlfriend, Emily Lane. Her eyes grew red as she spoke. "We were all so jealous of you back then," she said softly. "You got to evacuate with him in the very first group." The scenes from that war came flooding back, so brutal they surpassed imagination. Stray bullets tore through the night, sweeping across the refugee zone. Beneath the crumbling walls were cries of despair. Her voice trembled. There were wounded people everywhere. The sandbags were soaked with blood. You can't imagine how terrified I was. The old scar on my arm throbbed faintly. Of course I knew what it was like to be buried alive under rubble, waiting for rescue that never came. Then she suddenly seemed to remember something. "You and Ethan Brown must be married now, right? Life must be peaceful for you two." I looked at her bright, admiring expression, and a strange, bitter irony rose inside me. Even after all these years, there were still people who didn't know the woman who left the battlefield with Ethan Brown that year wasn't me. It was Lily. I didn't know how to respond. Just then, my phone rang, saving me. I murmured an apology and turned away to answer. As soon as I picked up, a calm, gentle male voice came through the line. "You've arrived?" he asked softly. "Hey, what's wrong? You don't sound very happy." Even after all this time together, I was still amazed by how sensitive he was. Just one word from me, and he could sense my emotions. "I've prepared a welcome home gift for you," he said warmly. "Once I finish here, I'll come to you." A WeChat message popped up. It was the location of Cloudview Villa. I once carelessly mentioned how much I liked the garden design there. The gloom that had just weighed on me from old memories instantly faded. I curved my lips into a faint smile and turned the steering wheel. I didn't expect that I would end up running into the one person I never wanted to see again. As soon as I pushed open the heavy door, the sound of voices and laughter rushed out. Cloudview Villa, which had been auctioned off years ago, was now my private residence. So why on earth was someone throwing a party here? Surprised, I scanned the room, my eyes finally landing on the man sitting in the center, surrounded by people like stars orbiting a sun. Ethan Brown. He looked more mature now, but that quiet, distant air about him was still the same. Dr. Brown, someone said cheerfully, raising a glass. We were only able to confirm that General Lucas Turner was returning tonight thanks to you and his secretary. Another voice chimed in. I heard Dr. Brown even gave up his position as a military doctor at the border because of Lily Turner. Yes, they say the general decided to shift his military base inland just because his wife wanted to return home, a man added with a grin. Even this Cloudview villa, worth $1.08 billion, was bought by him for her. I even prepared a set of high-grade jade jewelry as a gift for Mrs. Turner. I wonder if it'll catch her eye. Someone laughed lightly. Hard to say. General Turner guards his wife like a treasure. Hardly anyone has even seen her face, let alone knows what she likes. So that was it. They were all here, circling around for a slice of the profit from the Turner family's upcoming projects. I could only blame that clumsy secretary. How careless could one be? This villa, which my husband and I had never even properly moved into, was now being used for someone else's business party. I couldn't imagine how much money had already been pocketed behind my back. Through the crowd, Ethan's gaze suddenly met mine. The moment he saw my face clearly, the polite smile on his lips froze, replaced by shock, and something else I couldn't quite name. After a moment of stunned silence, he began to walk toward me, almost like a man who had lost his soul. Emily, you're still alive, he breathed. His voice trembled with relief, mixed with years of guilt that seemed to dissolve in an instant as he saw me standing there, safe and sound. How ironic. 6 years ago, Ethan Brown and I had served together in the border medical unit. Back then, I often leaned against the clinic window, secretly watching him out in the training yard, showing soldiers how to bandage wounds and perform emergency care. He would often pretend to pass by my office, holding a cup of freshly warmed milk. Over time, even his rescue dog, Shadow, would get excited every time it saw me, wagging its tail and tugging at Ethan's pant leg, urging him to bring it over. Once, during a border skirmish, the medical post was surrounded by armed militants. To distract them and protect the severely injured villagers who needed evacuation, I volunteered to stay behind as a hostage. But before I could react, someone yanked me backward. It was Ethan. He was shot in the arm, yet he still clenched his fists and stood tall, facing the danger head-on. I'm the military doctor, he said coldly. My survival value is higher than hers. The rebel leader refused to negotiate. Ethan and I were tied up, hands bound behind our backs, and locked in a half-collapsed trench. When gunfire roared outside, Ethan didn't hesitate. He pulled me beneath him to shield me. Hot tears fell onto my neck as he whispered, "If we make it out alive, Emily, marry me." After that, he was reassigned to the main medical corps, while I stayed behind at the forward medical outpost. I always believed we were different from other couples who had stood side by side at the border, that somehow our story would have a happy ending. Until he was given the responsibility of looking after Lily Turner, the daughter of his superior. He would often sigh to me, saying, "Emily, she's so clumsy. I've taught her the basics of first aid a dozen times, and she still forgets, and she keeps insisting I train with her." Then with a faint chuckle, he added, "She's nowhere near as strong as you." Even when she got a minor scratch, Lily would cry in the middle of the night and call Ethan to come to her. That was when I first began to question the boundaries she constantly crossed. At first, Ethan admitted he was wrong and apologized, but over time he started to think I was being unreasonable, asking why I was always so sensitive about a girl with asthma. I tried to fool myself, convincing my heart to keep walking alongside him, pretending nothing had changed. But that year, the border conflict erupted into full-scale war. Lily and I were trapped together, and the one leading the evacuation team was Ethan Brown. He pushed me aside without hesitation, his voice full of reproach. "You've been stationed at the border for years. You're used to this. But Lily's different. She's sick. Even the sound of explosions could trigger her asthma. There's only one seat left on the plane. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Do you really want her to die before you'll stop?" I couldn't accept it. I ran after the off-road vehicle, the dust choking my throat. I chased until I stumbled over a pile of debris at the roadside, my arms slamming into a jagged metal beam. Blood streamed down, the pain almost unbearable. And yet, all the way down that road, he kept holding Lily tightly in his arms, never once turning back to look at me. A sharp, feminine voice pulled me back to the present. "So it's you, Emily Lane?" Lily Turner, noticing the sudden change in Ethan's expression, immediately stepped forward and wrapped her arm tightly around his. Her eyes on me were full of hostility, laced with smugness, like a declaration of ownership. "You disappeared for 3 years. Everyone thought you were dead. That year, Ethan had no choice but to leave you behind to save me. If you need someone to blame, then blame me," she said, her voice quivering just enough to sound fragile and pitiful, the same look that always triggered Ethan's instinct to protect her. "Emily, don't make this harder for her," Ethan said, his tone calm but distant. "I don't know what brought you here or what you've heard, but I've already let go of the past. You should go. Cloudview Villa isn't a place for someone like you. I came here to find him." If those words reached Lucas's ears, my entire past would explode into the open. And if he ever discovered the truth about my history with Ethan, he'd lose his temper for weeks, jealous enough to keep me locked in the house until he calmed down. The tension on Lily's face instantly melted at Ethan's words. The corners of her mouth curved into a triumphant smile. "Ethan, she came all the way here to see you. The least you can do is talk to her for a bit, right?" She exchanged a quick glance with her group of girlfriends, their eyes gleaming with malicious amusement. Then she picked up a glass of wine and sauntered toward me. "Emily, after the evacuation that year, all contact with the border war zone was completely cut off. Every rescue team said they'd done everything they could for you. How could anyone possibly survive a place engulfed in fire and explosions?" She deliberately emphasized those last 4 words, fire and explosions, making several women nearby cover their mouths to stifle giggles. Another woman, dressed to the nines, spoke up with a disgusted expression. "I heard that during those border wars, the refugee camps barely had any women. Even in peacetime, some would trade a piece of bread for company. In a war zone, people would do anything just to stay alive." Someone else chimed in with a pitying sigh, patting Lily's arm. "Oh, come on, she probably didn't have a choice. Not everyone's as lucky as you, Mrs. Turner, to have a man who treats you like something precious." Then came another voice, sharper and crueler. "Emily Lane, after what you must have gone through, how can you still have the nerve to cling to Dr. Brown? Have you no shame?" Lily Turner let out a soft, mocking laugh as she swirled the wine in her glass, her gaze dripping with pity and disdain. "You used to take care of Ethan in the medical unit, didn't you? That must have been hard for you. I'm someone who values old friendships, so if tonight's collaboration with General Turner goes smoothly." For the new medical project, Lily said with a saccharine smile, "I could leave you a nurse's assistant position. The pay won't be much, but at least it's honest work. Better than what you used to do, right?" She deliberately dragged out the last part, her tone dripping with mockery. Her friends immediately joined in, pretending to sigh in admiration. "Mrs. Turner, you're just too kind. Someone like her is used to dirty work anyway. You're being generous not to say it out loud." Ethan remained silent, but his fingers tightened around his wineglass. His gaze flickered toward me, an unconscious look that held a faint trace of something unspoken. "Ethan? You once stood shoulder to shoulder with me at the border. Of everyone here, you know better than anyone what the medical team went through to protect that land. We clawed for survival amid bombings, built makeshift clinics with what little we had. And now you're standing there, watching Lily Turner humiliate me. Humiliate every medic who ever fought on the front lines. After all those years of hardship, you've forgotten everything you once stood for. You've rotted all the way down to your bones." Seeing that even my expression didn't waver, the group of women grew bored and turned to leave. Then, suddenly, click. The sharp sound of a recorder turning on echoed through the hall. Every cruel, mocking word they had just spoken filled the silence of the room. Lily's face went pale. "Emily Lane, you recorded us?" I replied calmly. "Everything you just said will be made public. From now on, the Turner Corporation and all affiliated sectors will cease any collaboration with anyone in this room." Her voice trembled. "What do you mean?" I said evenly, "that every business resource under Turner, including this Cloudview Villa, belongs to me. Now, get out." The laughter and chatter that had filled the banquet hall instantly died, like someone had flipped a switch. Every person discussing their business proposals froze and turned toward me, staring as if I'd lost my mind. Lily Turner recovered first and let out a derisive laugh. "Emily, are you insane? Ethan and I are well known in the medical community. We can't even get close enough to meet General Lucas Turner himself. It took endless effort just to reach his secretary. We only found out tonight that the general and his wife were returning home to move into Cloudview Villa. We've been waiting respectfully in the side hall all evening." Her voice dripped with disdain. "And you? Who the hell do you think you are to claim ties to the Turner family? Be careful, you might die one day without even knowing why." Just then, the main doors of the banquet hall swung open. A middle-aged man in military uniform stepped inside, his presence instantly commanding. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "It's Secretary Samuel Lynn, General Turner's aide," someone whispered. Everyone immediately straightened, forcing smiles, bowing politely on either side of the carpeted aisle. Ethan Brown quickly adjusted his collar, strode forward and greeted him with a wide, deferential smile. "Secretary Lynn, thank you for coming. May I ask when General Turner and Mrs. Turner will be arriving? We'd like to prepare a proper welcome." He watched the man's face carefully, gauging every flicker of expression, then added, "About the medical collaboration proposal, we're deeply grateful for your help in getting it reviewed. When the time comes, I hope you might put in a good word for us." Secretary Lynn didn't even glance at him. He walked straight to the head seat and sat down, sorting through his documents in silence. The hall grew tense. No one dared to move. Even standing still, people's legs began to tremble from the strain of waiting. Finally, he spoke in a low, steady voice. "The general has reviewed your proposal." At once, Lily's face lit up, and her friends immediately started gushing. "With the Turner Corporation's support, Dr. Brown's medical company is sure to skyrocket," one of them said. "Mrs. Turner, you're the model of an elegant society wife," another chimed in with fake adoration. "We're so jealous, just remember to look out for us when you're at the top." Basking in their flattery, Lily Turner's vanity was fully satisfied. She glanced at me, standing quietly in the corner, her voice sharp with mockery. "Congratulations, Emily Lane. I keep my promises. There'll still be that nurse's assistant position waiting for you." The hall fell silent once again. Bitter laughter erupted around the room, sharper than a slap in the face. "Mrs. Turner is too soft-hearted," someone sneered. Back then, Emily Lane was left behind at the border. Nobody knew if she lived or died. Her parents even went to the Duan house to make a scene and were only chased off after a long fight. What happened next? On the way home, they had an accident, both dead. A girl from a family like that is like that, you know? Clinging to Dr. Duan like that, best not give her any chance. My breath caught, as if a fire were flickering to life beneath my ribs. I used to tell myself it was just an accident, but the truth was my parents had gone looking for me and had been driven away by Ethan Brown. Desperate, they met with that terrible crash and died horribly. Secretary Lynn heard the commotion and glanced in my direction. When he saw my face, his expression changed violently. The stack of documents in his hands slipped and thudded to the floor. He wiped the cold sweat from his brow and hurried over to me, bowing low. "Madam, I'm so sorry. I truly didn't know you were here." His lips trembled, his features grew more panicked by the second, his body shook as if he might fall to his knees. But I heard nothing at all, as if a transparent membrane had descended between me and the rest of the world. All that remained were the sharp, scalding insults of those women ringing in my ears. "Your parents ran into an accident on the way home, both dead. Karma, right? Serves you right." Old memories sped through my mind like a fast-forwarded film. I met Ethan Brown at the border clinic when he was first assigned there. He fell gravely ill from the climate and had a high fever, and I stayed by his bedside, giving him medicine and drying him off. He told me his parents divorced when he was little, and that he grew up with his grandmother, always yearning for a peaceful home. My mother knew this, so whenever she sent packages from the countryside, she added another parcel with dried herbal medicine and homemade cookies she'd made by hand. He would take me on his motorcycle down to the village clinic. In the basket there were always the red sugar rice cakes my mother made. Ethan used to say, When the war is over, I'll take you home, buy your parents a house with a garden, and treat everyone kindly for the rest of our lives. And yet in the end, he repaid kindness with betrayal. To cut ties with me and win Lily's favor, he forcibly drove my parents from their home. I can't imagine how utterly hopeless they must have felt in that moment, unable to avoid the oncoming truck. Their bodies so mangled they could not be put together again. My sobs mixed with a hoarse scream, and my voice thundered across the banquet hall. The air felt sucked dry. Every scrap of noise, every mocking, triumphant sound froze on the faces of those present. Lily Turner's expression drained of color. With a strangled cry, she lunged and grabbed Secretary Lynn's arm. "Secretary Lynn, you must have the wrong person. That insane woman cannot possibly be General Turner's wife. Look at her. Shabby clothes, disheveled. She might only look like her. Surviving years at the border is a miracle. There's no way she could have climbed into the Turner family. What the hell is going on here?" Ethan Brown furrowed his brow and shot me a contemptuous glance, as if I were a nuisance he couldn't shake. He bent slightly, forcing a strained smile at Secretary Lynn. Yes, it must be a mistake. General Turner will be arriving soon. Please, don't let this madwoman cause a disturbance. Have someone escort her out." Secretary Lynn's face darkened to an extreme, as if he wanted to tear the two foolish people in front of him apart. He shoved Ethan's hand away roughly, his eyes icy as a blade. "I am not mistaken about General Turner's wife. How dare you insult her like that? I will record every single insulting word you spoke, and report it all." I could tell they didn't understand what hit them. Lily trembled as if her soul had left her body. She stepped forward and forced out a smile that looked worse than crying. "Emily, those things I said were just jokes. Don't take them to heart. People who don't know are innocent. Besides, I have feelings for the past. Didn't I just offer you a job? Look what we can do for you." I cut her off with a short, bitter laugh, then stood and swung my hand with all my strength, slapping her hard across the face. Lily clutched her cheek, tears spilling down. "Ethan, are you blind? You just stand there and let her hit me like that?" she cried. "Emily," Ethan warned, voice low, "don't push it." Slap, slap. Each crisp strike echoed through the banquet hall. Lily's hair was a mess, her lips split and bleeding, her cheeks swollen and red, her eyes clouded and her words slurred. "Ouch, it hurts. It really hurts," she whimpered. The women who had been flattering her collapsed to their knees with a thud, trembling. "We're sorry, Mrs. Turner. We didn't know who she was. It was all Lily's idea. Please spare us. If you forgive us, we'll do anything." My wrist throbbed from slapping her, but Secretary Lynn immediately brought a chair and gently helped me sit, pressed a cup of hot tea into my hands, and didn't dare look straight at me. He stammered apologies, insisting that everything chaotic that had happened at Cloudview Villa today was his fault. He muttered that he'd been riding the Turner name for small gains, but this had ballooned into something huge. Now that the general was on his way back, there'd be no chance to cover it up. Everyone bowed their heads, unwilling to meet my ice-cold gaze. Only Ethan stood motionless in the center of the hall like a statue. The corner of his eye was red. In a hoarse, wounded voice he said, "Emily, are you really married? How could you? You once told me you'd only ever marry me. How could you be with another man? Didn't you fear divine punishment? So they were right. You really are that kind of woman, chasing anyone with better prospects. Ha, it's ridiculous. You were the betrayer, yet you dare criticize me. Maybe you still dream that I waited for you my whole life, even die for you, just to satisfy my empty pride. On what basis? Besides, you didn't even recognize that your life was nearly over." Seeing me remain silent, thinking I was consumed by regret, Ethan stepped forward 2 paces, shoved Secretary Lynn aside, and spoke with condescending confidence. "Emily, leaving you at the border back then was my fault, but consider it even now. Let's divorce. I'll take care of you. With the Turner name behind you, no matter the power, a woman who can't marry the man she loves will never have a complete life." I smiled, stepped back to lengthen the distance, grabbed my tea, and hurled it at him with all my force. The cup shattered on impact, scalding tea sprayed across Ethan. He grabbed his head and screamed in pain as blood ran from his forehead, soaking his collar. He tried to restrain his anger, clenching his teeth to keep up that false calm. "You hit me. Fine. Get angry, then calm down. I did send people to look for you that year, but the war became chaotic, and there was nothing we could do. What else could I do? Don't worry, though you can't marry into the Turner family. If we divorce, I'll make sure you live in comfort for the rest of your life. I swung my hand and slapped him twice, sharp, resounding slaps. That filthy mouth of his sure knew how to turn white to black. Ethan Brown glared at me, his eyes burning with hatred, as if he could devour me alive. Emily Lane, he spat, his tone dripping with venom, don't mistake kindness for weakness. You think that just because you married General Turner, you're untouchable? Men with power always have 3 wives and 4 concubines. When he gets tired of you, he'll toss you out like a mangy dog. And when that day comes, even if you crawl to me on your knees, I won't spare you a single glance. The massive doors of the hall suddenly burst open with a thunderous crash. A squad of soldiers in uniform stormed in, their movements sharp and disciplined, subduing everyone in the room before anyone could react. Then a tall, imposing figure stepped inside. His fitted military uniform accentuated the strength of his frame, his presence was commanding, and the atmosphere instantly grew heavy, almost suffocating. General Lucas Turner. Someone gasped. The crowd immediately bowed low, holding their breath, afraid even to exhale too loudly. The moment I met Lucas's deep, piercing gaze, the last bit of strength I'd been clinging to vanished. Before I could even form a word, he strode toward me in long, powerful steps and pulled me firmly into his arms. His hand came up to steady me, gently patting my back before his cold, commanding voice rang out across the hall. So, he said, his tone like ice, has the Turner department fallen so low that anyone thinks they can insult my wife without consequence? His sharp gaze swept the room, cutting through the silence like a blade. Who was it, he asked quietly, who dared tell my wife to divorce me? His voice wasn't loud, but the weight behind it froze the entire hall. The air itself seemed to solidify. No one dared lift their head. People trembled, wishing they could sink into the ground to hide. Only Ethan Brown stood rigid in the middle of the room, his jaw tight, his eyes full of defiance. I honestly couldn't understand him anymore. He had worked so hard to cling to the Turner department for that medical project. And now, even knowing that if the Turner Corporation wanted to crush his family, it would be as easy as killing an ant, he still chose to provoke Lucas. Was his fragile pride really worth that much? Was it truly just because my marriage had bruised his ego? Sure enough, Ethan gritted his teeth and hissed, a stolen wife and an unending grudge, there's no room for us under the same sky. I don't care how powerful the Turners are. Even if we lose every partnership, even if my family pays dearly for it, I will never bow to a lowlife like you. Even the guards, whose faces were trained to remain expressionless, inhaled sharply at his words. It had been years, since anyone had dared speak that way to General Lucas Turner. The last man who tried had vanished in the desert borderlands, his body never found. But Ethan was too naive. He thought that even with all his power, Lucas was bound by rules, that because he was once a military doctor at the border, his service record would protect him. At worst, he thought, he'd lose a business contract. He didn't understand. Lucas Turner had once commanded troops on the most dangerous front lines. He had held the lives of countless men in his hands. Lucas didn't even need to speak. The guards immediately moved, pinning Ethan's arms behind his back despite his frenzied struggle. A dry, snapping sound broke the air, followed by his piercing scream. You bastards! Ethan shouted through his pain. Do you know who I am? Who gave you the right? But Lucas simply raised his hand, signaling them to stop. He rolled up his sleeves, stepped forward, and looked down at Ethan from above as if gazing at a dying stray dog. His voice was low, but every word cut deep. She doesn't love you, Ethan. And tell me, should she love the kind of animal who abandoned her in the middle of a war zone for another woman? Do you even know what she went through at that border? My fingers brushed against the jagged scar on my arm. My vision blurred. When the border finally fell, chaos swallowed everything. Those with weapons ruled over life and death. The raiders cut off all outside communication, rejecting every offer of humanitarian aid. While the rest of the world lived in peace, those at the border were trapped in a living hell. Every hour, civilians died. For an entire year, the massacre never stopped. There was no clean water. There was no food, no medicine. Children who had lost their parents hid among the rubble, not knowing if the next stray bullet would pierce their skulls. Every day was spent in fear, with not even a flicker of hope left to hold on to. One day, while I was out searching for medicine, I came across a barefoot boy covered in cuts and bruises, his eyes dull and glassy. In his hand, he clutched half a piece of bread crawling with flies. "You can't eat that," I told him softly. "It'll make you sick." He looked up at me, his cracked lips trembling, his voice hoarse. "It's the last thing my mom left for me," he whispered. I touched his thin, dirt-streaked face, my chest aching so badly I could barely breathe. Never in my life had I wished so desperately for Ethan Brown to appear like I did at that moment. To come and save me. To save everyone trapped in that living hell. But that was nothing more than the foolish dream of a hopeless woman. In that lawless, godless world, I could only take the boy by the hand and lead him from one hiding place to another. That day, the loudspeakers crackled to life, announcing a rescue point beyond the mountain, and that supply drops would be made there. For the first time in months, the survivors saw a faint glimmer of hope. Everyone who was still breathing clawed their way out of the ruins and ran toward the supposed refuge. No one knew there were no supplies waiting there, only a massacre. The warlords opened fire indiscriminately, mowing down the crowd with machine guns. I was buried under a pile of bloodied corpses. The boy, who had just been holding my hand moments earlier, had asked, "Doctor, will the rescue team give me some candy?" Now he lay still beside me, his wide eyes staring blankly up at the gray sky. No breath, no life left. In the haze before I lost consciousness, a tall figure appeared above me. He bent down and lifted me into his arms. His embrace was broad, steady, and warm, the only warmth I had felt in hundreds of days of cold, unending despair. When I woke, I was lying in a clean medical tent. Lucas Turner sat quietly at my bedside, his expression unreadable. "Why did you save me?" I asked weakly. He didn't answer. Instead, he rolled up his sleeve, revealing a jagged bullet scar running across his arm. That was when I realized it was him. General Lucas Turner, the supreme commander of the border defense line. A man who had been stationed for years at the most dangerous frontier, whose sharp strategies made every hostile faction fear him. A man who quite literally held life and death in his hands. But that same power had earned him countless enemies. Once, during an operation, his team was ambushed, leaving many dead or wounded. He was shot and fell down a mountainside, unconscious. At the time, I was still stationed at a forward medical post, out in the mountains collecting herbs with a colleague. When my colleague recognized the rank on his uniform collar, he stopped me immediately. "Don't get involved," he warned. "General Turner has too many enemies. Saving him will only bring trouble. And someone with that much power, who knows how much blood is on his hands?" I hesitated, then walked away. But that night, I couldn't sleep. His blood-soaked face kept flashing through my mind. Maybe it was instinct, the instinct of a doctor. I couldn't turn my back on someone clinging to life at death's door. So I took my medical kit and returned to the mountains under the cover of darkness. The night was pitch black. His face was caked in blood, and I couldn't even make out his features. All I could see was that even while unconscious, his hand was still gripping the gun at his waist, protecting something unseen. After bandaging his wound, I sat beside him and murmured, "Next time, don't get hurt again, okay? I might not be there to save you." I never imagined that small act of mercy would one day be the reason he saved my life. As the memory faded, I looked coldly at Ethan Brown. "You're not even worth a single hair of Lucas Turner," I said. "When I think about how I once loved you, I feel sick." My words made Lucas's expression soften with quiet satisfaction. The corners of his mouth lifted ever so slightly, just enough to betray a flash of pride. Ethan's face flushed crimson. "Emily," he stammered, "I admit I was wrong before, but what I said back then was true." "Lily has asthma," Ethan Brown said, his voice trembling slightly as if trying to justify himself. "She was spoiled since childhood. How could she endure a war zone? But you're different. You've lived at the border for years. You're stronger. I thought it would only be 2 or 3 days before I could send a rescue team back for you. I never expected the war to spread that quickly. All the retreat routes were blocked. I never got another chance to return." All excuses. A man as selfish to his core as he was would never admit he was wrong. To him, everything was always someone else's fault. My fault for being unreasonable, for causing trouble, for turning things into what they became. I laughed bitterly. "And what about my parents?" I said coldly. "You used to eat at our house, remember? You said you'd always repay their kindness. And what happened? Just to cut ties with me, you threw them out of your family's home. Their daughter was missing in a war zone. You think they weren't already heartbroken? And still, you stabbed them straight through the heart, pushed them to despair." Ethan's face turned pale. He opened his mouth, maybe to defend himself, but before he could utter a word, one of Lucas's guards punched him square in the face. Blood and teeth flew as he stumbled backward, nearly collapsing. My voice came out like ice. "From start to finish, you've always been a greedy, self-serving coward. You only liked Lily because she was the daughter of your superior, the one who could get you out of the border's misery. You climbed on the backs of others to rise up, became some respected medical company director, and enjoyed the applause while pretending to be noble. That's easier than being a military doctor dodging bullets, isn't it? That's why you kicked my parents out, cut me off, and crawled your way into power. You lived comfortably while stepping over those who once risked their lives beside you. You're not even human, you're filth." As I spoke of my parents' deaths, Lucas Turner's face darkened instantly. He gave a slight gesture to the guards, who gently helped me up and led me toward a private restroom. "I'll take care of those two myself," he said in a voice so calm it sent chills through the air. I panicked for a moment, afraid he'd go too far. "Lucas," he glanced at me, his eyes softening slightly as he whispered, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I won't let you see anything unpleasant." An hour later, the guards escorted me to an empty field behind Cloudview Villa. Ethan Brown and Lily Turner were tied up, their mouths uncovered, their terrified screams echoing through the silent mountain air. It was desolate here. No one would hear them, no matter how hard they screamed. Lucas draped a wool blanket gently over my shoulders and helped me sit in a chair prepared in advance. His voice was calm, deep, and cold. "Emily, if you're scared, close your eyes. But everything they owe you, I'll make them pay back 100-fold. I shook my head, my eyes fixed on the two trembling figures in the distance. "The pain my parents endured," I said softly. "They'll feel it, bit by bit." Just then, the roar of engines split the stillness. A line of military off-road vehicles burst through the darkness, headlights cutting across the night, illuminating Ethan's and Lily's faces twisted in sheer terror. They seemed to understand what was coming and began thrashing wildly, but the ropes were too tight. They couldn't move, only slammed their foreheads into the dirt, scraping their skin until blood streamed down. They no longer even felt the pain, they just cried and begged hysterically. "Emily, please, please forgive us. We know we were wrong. I beg you. Don't do this." I took a slow sip of hot tea, my expression detached. "You don't know you were wrong," I said flatly. "You're just afraid to die." I lifted my hand slightly. At once, the off-road vehicles surged forward like arrows loosed from a bow. The screech of tires mixed with Ethan's shrill, desperate screams. He trembled so violently that he wet himself in terror. Pathetic, pitiful. And yet, when the vehicles swerved to a stop, sparing them at the last second, Ethan started laughing, wildly, hysterically. "I knew it, Emily," he gasped, eyes wide and crazed. "You wouldn't really kill me. Would you?" I smiled faintly and lifted my hand once more. The off-road vehicles roared to life again, engines howling as they spun around and charged straight toward them. Ethan's smile froze instantly. His eyes bulged wide, terror distorting his face. After several rounds of being dragged back and forth between life and death, Ethan completely broke down. His gaze went vacant, his body limp. Gone was the confident man who once strutted around with self-importance. Only when he saw Lily Turner convulsing on the ground beside him did something flicker in his eyes, a flash of hatred, venomous and crazed. "This is all your fault," he snarled hoarsely. "If you hadn't seduced me, Emily would never have hated me. You're the one who deserves to die." The next second, as another vehicle hurtled toward them, Ethan, in a blind panic, kicked Lily toward the oncoming wheels. But in his own desperate scramble to dodge, he stumbled, too slow. The truck clipped him, dragging him under. A sickening crack echoed through the air. His spine snapped clean in half. Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief, blood spilling from his mouth as he stared up at me, every line of his face twisted in agony. I stepped toward him, the heels of my shoes clicking sharply against the dirt. Crouching down in front of him, I tilted my head and smiled. "This isn't my fault," I said softly. "You were the one who threw yourself in front of the car. Your back must hurt like hell, doesn't it? Maybe this is just karma catching up with you." He tried to reach for me, his fingers twitching in the air, but they caught nothing. A final, ragged breath escaped his throat before his body went still forever. "Let's go," Lucas Turner said quietly, taking my hand. "Don't let filth like this ruin your mood." Without another glance back, he led me away. After that night, part of the Turner department's influence shifted back into the country. Every family and corporation that had ever insulted or defamed me soon found themselves in turmoil, financial chains severed, corruption scandals exposed, their reputations crumbling overnight. They begged for mercy, sent letters, even tried to arrange meetings, but not one of them was ever granted an audience with Lucas Turner. One by one, they collapsed into bankruptcy and ruin. I paid no attention to those power struggles. Instead, under the Turner Department's name, I established a charitable foundation dedicated to helping civilians at the border, those whose lives had been destroyed by war. We rebuilt homes, schools, and clinics, giving them back the hope they'd lost. And that was where the story ended.